conversation with a very unique person. She studied to be a neurologist. She could have had a very promising career in the United States of America, but she gave all that up so that she could study with a guru called Swami Chidanand Saraswati of Rishikesh, India. She now devotes her life to serving humanity. Her name is Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati. I want to start by asking you a question which relates to something I read in Swamiji's biography, which I believe you wrote an introduction to. The autobiography, or the biography, is called By God's Grace.
I actually wrote the biography.
You actually wrote
it? It's his life.
Yes.
And I did as much of it in I don't like the word channeling, but for lack of a better word, what I really tried to do was bring his life as he's explained it, as he shared it, as he's talked about it, into words for everyone. It was actually by far the favorite project that I've ever done.
Did you tell me you did it in like record time? You did it. How long did it take you to do that biography?
Well, if you include all three versions, then it took a lot longer. But what happened was that the first couple of versions that I did, I actually ended up throwing out 2 entire manuscripts. Reason being, when you are writing about someone like Pujya Swamiji, my goal was not just to tell a story. It wasn't about how can we just make people interested, impressed, even inspired by his life. But in addition to that, how can they have the feeling, the experience of actually sitting with him? That it's not, I didn't want it to be me telling his story in my voice. My goal was, how can I actually tell his story in his voice, in a way that the reader would feel that they actually were in his presence, not listening to someone else tell a story about him.
Yes.
And so the first 2 manuscripts just, in my opinion, didn't do that. And it's a long story, but the bottom line of it was that I had gotten to this incredible deadline with the publishers saying, I need a manuscript. I didn't have a manuscript that felt to me like his presence was in it. It was a good story.
Yeah.
But his presence didn't feel like it was there. And I knew that in order to really be able to bring his presence there, I had to do it in a way in which it was much more meditative than directional. It wasn't me sitting down to type a story, but me sitting down and removing myself as much as possible, of really entering just a state of meditation so that he could enter into that space. You know, they tell us in science that nature hates a vacuum. And so if you want something magical to enter, the first thing you have to do is create the space for it. And up until that moment, all of the writing that I had been doing had been trying to figure out how to write it in a way in the midst of my otherwise busy life. Oh, I've got an hour here, I have half an hour here, I have a little time here. Okay, I'll shut myself away here. And what that had given me were 2 manuscripts that were interesting, but that didn't feel to me like he was there. And so we had Navaratri coming up, and I had the publishers just breathing down my neck, wanting one of my other 2 manuscripts, and I actually had deleted both of them from the computer. I didn't tell the publishers that because I thought, oh, they'll kill me. But I deleted them. I felt like
brave.
I needed to create the space. As long as they existed on my computer, the impulse would have been, I'll just edit it. I'll just fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that I actually needed to have empty space be there, into which something really magical could flow. And so, by God's grace, Navaratri was coming up. And I decided, I'm just going to go into silence. And I actually ended up having to start it a couple of days into Navratri because I was traveling. But as soon as I got back to Rishikesh, it was a matter of complete silence, no phones, no emails, no nothing, no meeting people, earplugs in, and just, as I said, I hate the word channeling. It wasn't that. It was removing myself as much as I could and creating as much of an empty space into which his voice and his presence could flow. So it wasn't so much a matter of record time. Yes, I mean, it was 6-7 days. The minute his presence came in, the story told itself. And that was literally how I did it.
And you did it in 9 days throughout Navratri?
Yep, 6-7 days, because I missed the first few. It was just a matter of literally sitting down at my computer, earplugs in, phones off the hook, eyes closed, and typing. And simply going through later and fixing all of the spelling mistakes that one would make if you type with your eyes closed. But the presence had just come and had told the story. So it was an amazing experience, A, because it brought out something that is definitely, to me, the dearest and most precious and by far my favorite project I've done. But even more than that, it was just such a personally amazing experience to have that presence be there in that way for so many days in a row.
Amazing. So it's in that book that I read, you telling the story about how you came to be in Rishikesh studying with the Swamiji. And you mentioned that you had the sense of coming home. And I want to know, how does that feel? What is it to come home, first of all? How does that feel?
It's interesting because it's so similar in so many ways, actually, to what we'll be talking about this weekend in terms of your nature. Coming home is not coming home to a place. If you think about it for a minute, all of that which we say, oh, it's so nice to be home. And in our minds, we associate that with my physical house. But if everything that you identified with as home were removed, the people you loved, the energy that made it home, if that were removed, the four walls would have absolutely no ability to bring you that sense of comfort, serenity, peace, joy, stillness. That felt sense of I've come home. It's not the walls. It's the experience of being able to throw off that which is not self. I mean, really, what does coming home mean? We come home at the end of a long day, kick off our tight shoes that don't fit, throw off our suit and tie, take off our tight dress, wash off our makeup, put our feet up. What does that all mean? It's an undoing of that which is not self, that we have to literally and figuratively squeeze ourselves into during the day. Shoes, pants, dress, clothes, personality, role, mask, relationships, all of that, which doesn't actually fit because it's not really self. And we come home and we're able to take it all off. And we're able to just be us. If in your home you had guests, a house full of guests, coming home wouldn't have nearly the same sense of as it does when it's just family, right? Because you'd have to keep on the mask, the facade, the role. Because here are all these people who are not yours. They're still guests. So for me, when I came to Rishikesh and I talk about having come home, it was a sense of experiencing for the first time who I really was. Having never had any awareness that I wasn't that with whom I had associated. I mean, I had spent 25 years thinking, this is me. And there was a role, there was a mask, there was a facade, and it was all good things. But when I finally came to Rishikesh and I stood on the banks of Ganga and I had Ganga's darshan, all of the masks, all of the veils, all of the roles, all of the indoctrination into what life was, what truth is, what reality is, what happiness is, were thrown off. I was pulled into this state inside of a literal into the self. And it came with, that was the internal experience, it came with a very external sense of actually having darshan, witnessing the divine. And the first aspect of that was in the form of Ganga. And that was where the tears came. But then, as I moved my head and my field of vision shifted, that experience of the divine stayed. So it wasn't, here's this divine Ganga, and then here are these ratty kids and these annoying people. It was, here's this vision of the divine. And then here it is now in the form of these beautiful divine children, these beautiful divine people, this beautiful divine rock. I mean, it literally was superimposed, doesn't work, but it's the closest word that I can think of at the moment. Superimposed would imply that you had one thing and you stuck something on top of it. And it wasn't really that, it was more, here it is now permeating everything that I'm seeing. And so this internal experience of this is self came with this external experience of, and wow, there is God and there is the divine. And it's in everything. And these two experiences merged really into one. Of just knowing that this was who I was and this was what the world was. And that nothing else mattered, and none of the masks and none of the roles and none of the facades and none of all of these things that I had always identified as self actually mattered. I mean, it would be like if you wore, these tight shoes forever and you slept in them and you really thought they were just an extension of your feet, and then one day someone took them off and you realized, oh my God, so this is what my feet really feel like. That was what it was like on a full being sense.
And so, would you say it's possible for people, women in particular, who have multiple roles with children, careers, If they don't have children yet, there's the pressure of having to get married. There's so many expectations to fulfill. So would you say that it's possible to have that experience of coming home in our everyday lives?
There's two pieces to that. In our home life, in our relationships, in our existence, other than places we don't want to be, which I'm going to come to as the second part, then yes, we absolutely should be able to have it. There absolutely should be, and I've now found this, so I can tell you that yes, it's possible, a way to not put back on the mask and the roles and the facades and the too tight shoes and the too tight clothes and all of this costume that isn't us in our personal lives, in our family lives, in the way we move through the world, in the way we interact. Absolutely, it's possible. The second piece, though, which is equally important, is that many people, simply due to the logistics of the way that our world works, it would be an ideal situation to say, follow your heart, follow your passion, do only that which feels closest to the self. And in an ideal, perfect world, we would be able to do that and put food on the table and send our kids to school and have enough money to get our parents the medical care that they needed. Tragically, the logistics of the world that we live in have created a situation where for many, many, many people, there are a certain number of hours in the day in which they really do have to play a role. But here's the important part of that. When actors go and play a part, if that part is, let's say, for example, a drug-abusing, wife-beating, valueless, angry, sociopathic person, no matter how good the actor is, they're always aware on some level that they are an actor playing a role. And they don't come home and now start beating up their wife simply because the role that they're playing, and playing well, is this sociopath. They understand, I'm playing a role. And it's my job and I enjoy it. I get paid a lot of money and it's entertaining, but they don't internalize it. They don't start to think I'm the sociopath. Even wonderful actors who talk about, becoming the role, still at the end of the day, take off the costume, wash off the makeup,
and start again the next day.
And they're themselves. And so we are able, regardless of what roles we have to play, and regardless of situations we may be in which we can't necessarily, or we don't feel comfortable necessarily, opening up the full nature of the self, that doesn't mean that we have to identify with the role. We need to still realize and identify with and live as the true self, with the awareness that, okay, in this drama of my life, in this drama of having to put food on the table and put my kids through school and get money to give medical care for my parents, I have to put on this costume, put on this makeup, say these lines. But that doesn't mean that I have to start identifying with it. It doesn't mean that I have to forget who I am. and start thinking, I am that costume, or I am these roles.
Isn't the issue, though, not so much that we've forgotten who we are, but that we don't remember? And I know forgetting is not remembering, but it's kind of like a paradox in the sense that we actually don't remember who we are in the first place, because it's obscured so much by one experience and then another, like layers of mud, if you like, on a diamond, as I like to think of it that way. And so we have this obscured view of what's actually within here. We have an inkling about it. We have a very slight sense of it, more often than not. And then there is this whole layer or layers of stuff, experiences, traumas, belief systems, all kinds of conditioning that we have that obscures that view. So when we talk about that, when you're talking about that, yes, it's possible. So therefore, what I hear you say is it's possible, providing you can remember who you are, providing you can connect to that essence of who you are, essentially, to begin with. So there's a process that one has to go through to uncover, if you like, to begin to remember who we essentially are. With that in mind, then, where does one begin? So let's say I'm starting on my journey now. Where should I begin?
It's a beautiful question. And the good news is that almost all of us are not that far away from a moment in which we did remember. It may not have lasted very long, and we may have forgotten, but it's not, for most of us, that we've spent decades and decades and decades without an experience of remembering. There are little things. For example, when we fall in love. And it doesn't necessarily have to be romantic. The love for a child. The love for a sunset. The love for a tree. The love that some of us have been blessed enough to have in a spiritual experience. Any experience in which the boundaries of the self dissolve. Think about the words that we use when we talk about even just romantic love. We talk about melting and merging, swimming, oceans, fireworks, right? They're words of a loss of the boundary of self. We were me and you. Now we fall in love and we become we. And that simple sense of where I end and you begin, even when we're not physically embraced, that sense is dissolved in that beautiful moment of being in love. And again, it's not limited to romantic love, though. Many of us have it with babies, and they don't even have to be our babies. I mean, I have it looking at babies standing in line at, immigration at the airport. You're waiting in line for them to check your passport, and in front of you there's this baby, and you've got this 30 seconds of an experience.
They look at you, you look at them.
In the eyes, and everything disappears, and you are swimming in some incredible existence in the eyes with this child. We have it with sunsets. We have it in nature. And again, of course we have it in spirituality, but I'm purposely not going there because for people who haven't had the spiritual experience, then they think, well, I haven't been blessed enough to have that. But it's possible even without that. So going back to your question, we're not that far from remembering. Most of us can pinpoint a time in recent history, regardless of how short-lived it may have been, in which we experienced a remembering. Then it becomes, as you so rightly said, a matter of removal of that which keeps us from remembering. One of my favorite stories is a story of a temple in Cambodia, I think it was, it may have been Thailand, where for hundreds of years they were worshipping this clay Buddha. And one day the monks are cleaning the Buddha and they see something shining from inside it. There's a little crack in the clay and something is shining. And so slowly they start to clean the clay around where it's shining to see what's shining. And as they clean, it's shining more and more and more. And so slowly they start to remove the clay. And they realize there's gold inside.
It's a gold Buddha.
And they find out that actually the Buddha is gold, not clay, but that when the invaders had come, the monks in the temple where they'd been worshipping the golden Buddha decided that the only way to save the golden Buddha from being looted and stolen and melted down was to cover it with clay and hope that the invaders didn't realize it was worth something. So the good news was that the Buddha survived, but the monks didn't. And so no one who knew that this Buddha was gold actually was there. And so they'd been worshipping this clay Buddha for hundreds of years. And I love that because it's such a perfect analogy of what you've asked. It's all there, but our clay makes us not remember it's there. And so then we go out in search of gold, either literal gold. If only I were rich, then I would be happy. If only I had a mansion, then I would be happy. If only I had a Mercedes, then I would be happy. If only I had this much gold, I would be happy. Or on a more spiritual level, if only I could do that training program, or if only I had that certificate, or if only I could do that course, or then I would have gold. I just, in order to become gold, I have to, learn that mantra, or take that program, or get certified in this, or get a degree in that. Then I'll become gold. Without realizing that it's all there, and that we've just covered it up. And so the path then becomes, as you ask, where do I start? The path becomes figuring out, well, what's my claim? What is it in my individual life? I mean, we can say across the board, it's some mix of our egos, our anger, our jealousies, our experiences, our histories, our traumas, as you said. But for each of us, it's a slightly different blend. And so the first question really becomes, what's my play? What is it in my life that makes me think that the gold is outside? What is it in my life that keeps me separate? What is my clay? And what part of my experience, my history, my trauma, am I so identified with that I believe that I'm not gold? And again, for most of us, it tends to be some sort of a mix of everything, ranging from something someone did to us, something our parents said, something our 5th grade teacher told us, you're worthless, you're stupid, you'll never be anything. Something the culture told us, something that actually happened to us. But with the awareness then, that it's not so much a memory, but an awareness that that's no longer me. The cells to which that happened, the skin cells that were abused, beaten, traumatized, have regenerated. Who is the I that was betrayed, abandoned, cheated, lied to, abused? If it happened more than 6 or 7 years ago, there's not a cell left in our bodies to which that happened, which makes us realize it's the memory. I'm actually holding on to it. So it's not a matter of not remembering, it's actually a matter of false memories. I mean, I've remembered something that happened, but it didn't happen to this being. I've carried forth a memory of something that happened to someone who no longer exists. And I've brought it into the being who does exist. And I've used it to cover up this wound.